truly a worldwide audience here. Some recent Portugal, Paris, a few here with us in Prague, Colombia, lots of different states in the US, Mexico, Trinidad and Tobago. That's great. Thank you all for being here. And if my colleagues are ready, and if you guys have your coffee, I think we're ready to get started here.
We're ready, I think.
All right. So as I said, my name is Taylor Byrne, content marketing specialist here at Social Bakers, and I work on the team of the esteemed Mantis, who will introduce himself first.
Hi, everyone. Mantis here, heading up the content team at Social Bakers, and been watching the trends really closely all of last year, and really eager to talk about what's coming in the next, or this year already.
And Maya?
Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us. My name is Maya. I'm Product Marketing Manager and Head of Competitive Intelligence. So yeah, really excited to dive in today.
Cool. And it's really, again, nice to see such a diverse crowd. And I'm sure, you have all your experiences coming from different regions. So it'd be really curious to hear about what you're seeing in the chat. But moving forward.
Yeah, so just a couple kind of bookkeeping notes here. As I said, if you can mark in your chat to all panelists and attendees so that everyone can see our discussion. And also, because this is a question that will come up, yes, you will receive both the presentation, a link to the report that the presentation is based on, and a recording of today's webinar. That'll be coming up in a follow-up email to you after we're done. And as this will come up kind of throughout, sometimes you're not going to see the specific data that you want for your region or industry. Follow up with that email that you receive, and our data team can work to get you the specific insights that you're looking for. So
yeah, and again, this is your time to get your questions answered. So drop them in the chat throughout this presentation, and we're going to answer them live right away. Now let's get into the agenda.
So I'll walk us through the agenda. It's today in three parts. First, we'll dive into advertising and see how digital ad spend looks like and has been looking like, and where and how much money is being spent online. Then we're going to cover organic engagement and see what are the consumers' behaviors, how they shifting online, and as a result of these shifts, what are the content trends that marketers are prioritizing. And last but not least, and this is a very heated topic, so be sure to also share your point of your opinion in the chat with us. And this is, of course, influencer marketing. And we will going to be looking at the latest data and trying to make sense of what's going on with the influencers at this time and age.
Yeah, really curious about that one. Looking forward to seeing what's going on in that field.
All right, so we'll start off with just a little poll here. And again, drop it in the chat. So what is your marketing outlook for 2021? We're nearly through the first month. Are you confident this is going to be your best year yet? You're pessimist, things are never going to improve. It was bad in 2020. Why would it change? Or, maybe you're just like some of us, just one foot in front of the other. It's a day at a time. Who knows what the year beholds? Seeing a lot of A and C,
Yeah.
So.
I'm nice so glad they're. Go on, Maya.
Yeah, it's nice to see that nobody's straight up pessimistic. Everybody has some kind of, positive outlook into the future.
Yeah, exactly. And I'd say, if we kind of look at our marketing department at the moment, I think there is a lot of optimism for this year, for sure. So we would be an A, but I think we're just moving very cautiously through the current landscape. And I would say probably measuring things more than we would otherwise, just because the market is just really volatile and the metrics change day to day. So we just have to be very careful.
All right.
So, well, I think the point is that we're going to answer exactly the way that you should be thinking through the data in this trends webinar. So probably the place to start is looking at how the advertisers are spending data, because that's really quite revealing. So maybe Taylor, could you walk us through the general landscape? What are we seeing?
Sure, yeah. Here we're looking at the evolution of ad spend by region. And so this is looking at both Q4 2019 through Q4 2020. And you can see that not only was there, the holiday increase that sometimes is just sort of the annual expected increase, but things really took off here after spring. Obvious when the pandemic hit, everything kind of shut down, very, very concerned about what might happen. But the year over year peak spend 50% worldwide average. And that's that purple line right in the middle there. We've got some of the regions broken out here. And as I said up at the top, if you don't see your region here, but you want more data on it, that's, follow up with our email and we can get that for you. But, Mantis, what sticks out to you other than, I suppose, just the surprise by the sheer total and the jump?
Yeah, so one thing is comparing the holiday seasons of 2019 versus 2020. I think it really signals that most of the budgets that are available to marketers are really shifting to digital ad spend, and I think that's what we're seeing. That's why it's such a sharp increase. There was some kind of concern that maybe this holiday season marketers will kind of tighten their wallets to save even further in an already difficult year, but that didn't happen. They actually chose to spend. And maybe if you think about it, like what's kind of left for marketers to really do outside of paid spend, like the shop experiences aren't really there during the holiday season. The stores aren't being redecorated. That budget is kind of free to go somewhere. So I think a lot of it is moving into social media spend. That's my take.
Yeah, totally. And it's also interesting to see that despite, all this budget reshuffling, we're still seeing some seasonality in the numbers. We still see in North America, for instance, this red line on top, we see the drop, and that's probably due to ad boycott. But a lot of these things and changes, while predictable, we could still kind of discern why certain things happen. So that's still a little bit reassuring that we kind of understand why certain things happen at certain period of times.
Yeah, but Maya, you're correct at that steep drop you see there in early June. That was for Blackout Tuesday. So that one single day when everything just completely was turned off. And then the other drop kind of in July is for that overall ad boycott. But as many predicted at that time, marketers returned after that. You ended in a big way. You look at Northern America, the way that it bounced back. Not sure that I would have predicted back in July that it was going to go up quite that much.
Yeah, there's a couple of good questions coming in. And so what actually are we looking here in terms of digital spend? So this is, we're talking social media, Facebook and Instagram in this specific chart. So we're looking at the key kind of social platforms. And I think there were earlier questions as well. Just there was a very practical question from Marina coming in as whether what do you do in this kind of competitive environment as a very small business, and you still need to advertise yourself and seen on social media. So how can you do that as a small business? Is it through content? Is it through advertising? Or is it for kind of more analysis and drawing insights on what to do? Any thoughts from you?
Well, I think it's a very unusual time for everybody, be it a small business or big business. And we will touch upon this later, that it's really the time, and the data is showing that it's really the time when a lot of businesses, no matter the size, no matter the industry or region, are figuring out their approaches and really shuffling around, trying new things. So maybe it's the time to try new things. And it's also the time when the competition is very high across the board in general. And it's a little bit uncertain for everybody. I think both big and small, as we're trying to figure out what's next.
Sure. Yeah, I think one thing that you're pointing at, Maya, is that small businesses have an agility to really test things a lot easier than large businesses. And so I think later in this presentation, you'll see there's a couple of data points that suggest there are things that marketers should be doing, but maybe not doing enough. And if you're a small business, you can do that much easier and quicker. There's less of approvals kind of in the process getting in a way. So it's definitely trying those things that maybe the big businesses haven't just tried just yet. So we'll get to that. But looking at industries, people are asking a little bit about like the industry spend. Taylor, what are we seeing?
Yeah, here we've got the quarter by quarter breakdown throughout 2020 for ad spend by industry. And, some of the ones that aren't quite a surprise, accommodation, when the pandemic hits, it really falls. But then at the same token, alcohol increases quarter by quarter. E-commerce, one of the biggest winners of everyone being closed in, because you can still shop, and sometimes that's the only option that you have. So that one increased a lot. FMCG food, so fast moving consumer goods, they're also kind of increasing steadily throughout. But what stands out to you, Mantis?
Well, for me, as also that small column there, the accommodation one, I'm surprised at how much it bounced back in the last quarter, and it's curious. I think there was a comment from Alba, yes, that definitely spent more in Q4 last year. I wonder if you're referring to 2019 versus 2020, but it looks like for many accommodation brands, that is coming back, the spending or the confidence, right?
Yeah, comment from Susanna. Pet care is booming. Yep, that's definitely one. Places that they're open, though. That's actually, we're coming to you from Prague. We saw earlier people chiming in from all over the world. This is hitting different regions really differently depending on the time. And if you're, a worldwide global brand, maybe it kind of levels out. But a small business, as we were asked about earlier, it's really pertains to your particular situation, and that can make it very difficult when everything kind of keeps changing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
There is a question in the chat from Natalie, where does tourism travel fit in here? It's not just accommodation. Mm-hmm. So again, if you have a specific question about the specific industry, make sure to follow up on this email that we will send as a follow-up. And of course, our data team and Taylor will be able to help. But in general, tourism and travel.
Yeah, well, they're in a separate category for sure. Exactly. And we have that data. We couldn't include every industry, but just reach out. And if you prefer social channels over email, reach out to our teams on any of the social channel you're using and ask for it for your country, and they'll get it to you.
Yeah, I have another note on the previous slide.
Yeah, go for it.
It's interesting, really, how consistent the growth is Q over Q, right? Here in pretty much every other industry that's shown, except for accommodation, of course, but also e-commerce. And here, the way that we tag this kind of industries, e-commerce, of course, could overlap with sometimes with fashion or with alcohol or beauty and retail, but I think it's also due to the fact that platforms itself, and we're talking mostly about Facebook and Instagram here, and platforms themselves gained a huge momentum when it comes to supporting the e-commerce, and they were releasing the product at really unprecedented cadence that helped to elevate this experience. We're really miles away right now when it comes to e-commerce, live shopping. We'll talk about this later as well, from where we were really last year at the same time. So I think that's also some things to consider. That platforms really were very nifty on their feet to kind of take an advantage of the situation here.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And if you compare kind of how the shopping experiences were on the platforms, let's say 2019 versus 2020, it's just an entirely different space. And if you open Instagram, 2 years back, it was a totally different app in that regard.
Yeah, I think virtually every Instagram format now is shoppable to some degree. Right. It's branded content or it's taggable content. I think it's pretty much all of them. So it's really,
and more coming for sure.
Exactly.
Right. So Taylor, do you want to drive this point back home?
Sure. Yeah. Here we're looking at just the evolution over the whole year 2019 versus 2020, and you see 2020 dips under in the spring and then just comes back huge. These are the median monthly values. And so it ends up 56% year over year, just a very strong increase. And I think some of that, we talk about why that is when things seem so uncertain. Well, part of it, this is going towards things that can be seen on your phone, can be seen anywhere. So if you had an outdoor advertising budget, well, that doesn't make any sense to keep putting money into it in 2020, or just kind of event-based as well. All of that stuff just shuts down. And so a lot of that, I think, pivots over to digital if it wasn't heading there already.
Yeah. A question from David: how does 56 compare to prior year or initial estimates? Do you recall what was the previous year growth?
Not offhand. I do not.
Okay, we have that report on the Social Bakers website. And
I do know that it was not that large of an increase. I believe
Yeah.
it certainly was an increase, but I want to say it was more in the teens.
Mhm. Yeah, it's a really good point, and we have the data, so we should look into it and just maybe do a comparison of all the years. All right. Speaking about click through and CPC, what should we be paying attention to here, Taylor?
Yeah, the stability of click-through rate is really kind of the thing that stands out. It's kind of through thick and thin, it's steady. Throughout the whole time, cost per click kind of follows the same type of trend that we've seen in some of these other evolution charts. But no matter what else was going on, the engagement, that click-through was still there. And that's, I mean, it's got to be, I think, a positive sign, a positive takeaway for marketers.
Mm-hmm. Any reflections on CPC, Maya?
Cost per click.
Yeah. Is it going to continue going up? What's your kind of feeling here?
I think, we see as we mentioned, there is much more competition coming into play here, and a lot of businesses, no matter the size or industry, are figuring out the things. But I would think it would continue growing for some time, and then it will kind of stabilize itself once we kind of have a more stable environment, I guess. But definitely the click-through rate is one helpful kind of beacon here that is stable, and it's really helpful to know that although we have very little idea about how other things will develop, at least we can make some decisions with the click-through rate stability in mind, that at least eases up some of the decisions that marketers have to make.
Yeah, we tend to get really kind of cautious and very worried whenever there's bigger world events unfolding to pause marketing often and pause campaigns, and sometimes for good reasons. But really, it's important to consider just that the audiences that you are advertising to are really large, and some of them, no matter how what event is really unfolding, probably will be in that purchasing stage or whatever kind of stage in the customer journey you're looking for. And I think Facebook is pretty good at its algorithm is pretty good at finding those people in a crowd. And I think that's, for me, that click-through signals that it's actually working pretty well.
Yeah, just one quick note on that. I think that CPC, if it follows kind of the traditional annual trends, I think we should expect that to go down in Q1 2021. Right. But I am curious if sort of the increased competition maybe makes it sort of a flat line. Like I certainly don't think it's going to continue up at the pace that we see there. But normally we would expect it to go down, and I'm maybe more expecting sort of steady as she goes.
Got it. Walk us through the data here. What are we seeing?
Yeah, so here we're looking at Facebook ads reach, and Northern America, nearly 78% year over year increase, and worldwide it was 23% when you look at Q4 2020 compared to Q4 2019. Every region increased, and part of that just it was more engagement just spreads things much further, and I think every region had seen an impact by this, some more than others, obviously, but it just pushed everything further.
Yeah, this is a really important, I think, point for marketers and as well Facebook. In the past years, there's been a bit of concern about Facebook slowing in terms of user growth in some regions, especially North America. And it's also kind of a reason maybe some people predicting there's going to be a slowing revenue growth for Facebook. But I think for me, this number, it just shows that that base of people who you can advertise to is actually increasing. And what's also increasing is probably the user behavior. It's just people are more inclined to interact with advertisement compared to previous years. And I can say that for myself. I think I've never interacted more with businesses through social media compared to this year, or in 2020, previous year, compared to any previous years. I don't know, how is it for you?
Yeah, definitely. It's never been easier, right? to interact
Yeah.
in that way. I would also be curious to hear from our viewers from Colombia and Mexico, because we see that Latin America there is just off the chart. What was your experience with that? What's your take on that personally? That would be interesting to hear.
All right. We'll jump ahead in the meantime.
And Mantis, I think we have a couple people who would like to ask questions if we want to
Oh
jump.
yeah, of course. Do you see the Q&A section? Are you able to open it?
Yeah, well, I've got, so Marina, I believe, raised her hand to ask a question. So we'll check in and see.
All right. Okay.
Hi.
Hi, Marina.
Hello from Cyprus. Greetings
Hello.
to everyone. I wanted to ask something about small businesses. I am a consultant of marketing for small businesses, and we find it increasingly challenging to stand out as more and more small businesses enter the area of social media. And I was thinking whether you have some ideas as to how do we stand out as small businesses, or how do I help my clients stand out? Is it budget? Is it content? Is it more into analytics? Is it something else that we're not aware of? Someone mentioned that we should do the things that large businesses do not do because we react faster. I think it was guy in the middle, sorry, I can't spell your name. But it is indeed something that we can do as small business. We react faster, but very often we lack the time and with the resources. Maybe as consultants we can help, but still there are many things that we cannot do either due to lack of funds or due to lack of time. So what do you think a small business should do to stand out in social media? Maybe a couple of ideas that you have. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks, Marina. That's great question. I think we can expand on this far more. Well, there's different areas that you can look into. So, and especially you want to look at areas that have a high yield in kind of ROI for small businesses. And one of these places is actually influencer marketing still, and especially for really small businesses, you see that's where they gain the most kind of ROI per spend. So if you have a really tight budget, sometimes you will go much further by paying that budget to a niche micro kind of influencer, or maybe a couple of influencers, as opposed to spending it on advertising, especially if you kind of if you're a smaller agency and if you're new to advertising, it's really easy to make mistakes and really kind of lose that money quickly. So if you're maybe are that kind of a business, it would make sense to partner with influencers. But in terms of advertising, then if you really had to rely on advertising, then you kind of have to get very clever at it and very good at it, because I think if you're pretty good at Facebook advertising, I don't think there's a difference whether you're a small business or a large business. Facebook ads are set up to bring ROI, and if you're able to kind of measure and link your activities to ROI, it doesn't matter what kind of size of business you are, you're going to be able to bring revenue. And the content, big discussion. I don't know if we'll have time to cover it, but for small businesses, organic growth and organic engagement, and maybe not even so much concerning social media, but more thinking about like the organic web growth and SEO kind of stuff that comes takes longer to build, and I would recommend investing in those.
Yeah, and I also believe that's a really good question, by the way. But I believe that maybe for smaller businesses in general and dealing with tighter budgets, maybe we'll be able to also help a little bit in the next section, which is organic engagement, because we will be pinpointing some of the maybe missed opportunities, points, and some of the trends that are performing well there as well. Not in terms of advertising, but in terms of organic. So maybe you will also be able to find some of the interesting highlights for you to take away.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so we got to jump into this next section, right? So maybe Taylor, can you start us off here?
Sure. Just kind of quickly looking at some of the differences this is the top 5 by relative spend on Instagram and Facebook. So Facebook feed by far the biggest, as we'll see in a couple slides. But that one increased 12% year over year. So not a huge growth, but anything on Facebook feed that grows, you're talking about big numbers. But it's kind of decreases for the most part elsewhere year over year on cost per click. But then you see kind of the CPM adjustments on the video options on Facebook. So that's video feeds and in-stream video Facebook. And if we Mantis, go to the next slide, also keep those two in mind specifically, and you see kind of the click-through rates that you can get there in the bottom right for video feed and in-stream video. Even though they are in the top 5 for relative spend, they're far lower than what you see on stories and the 2 main feeds, and you can really see some engagement results through those. And so that's one area, and we'll talk about live a little later, but that's one area that I would focus on if I'm kind of a smaller business trying to do you have the budget for video? That's I suppose another question, but that is where I would maybe target is some of these things off of the main feed.
Yeah. There's one point about this data in the previous chart that you showed that for me that really clearly shows about the platform is just how different they are and what you use them for. And also, like if you look kind of at click-through rates between Instagram placements and Facebook feed, for instance, it's just a huge difference in CTR, but also just the spend. So people tend to speak like how Instagram is where you kind of put your focus, that channel has good organic growth and so forth. But still, when we look kind of under the hood, like what's happening, where the money is going, so much is going to Facebook ad placements, right? Maybe even it's like clearer shown in this chart that shows ad placements in context in terms of share. Like most of it is on the Facebook feed, right? Maya, do you want to maybe add something here?
Yeah, definitely. It's definitely a missed opportunity for me. What we saw in the previous slide, when we see kind of the difference and mismatch between kind of like where the click-through rate happens and where the ad placements are happening. But also here we see that still 75% is like of ad placements happen on Facebook feed, Instagram stories, and then everything else is kind of up and coming, which is not to say that it will see a lot of changes in the coming months, days, I don't know, weeks. One thing to point out here is, maybe for the smaller business Facebook feed, especially automatic placement, it's pretty usually good and stable into returning the kind of stable return of your objectives, depending on what they are. So this is the discussion that we usually are having around those, right? So is it the automatic placement that you are choosing or usually opting out for, or is it manual placement? But another thing that I think I would like to point out here is the Facebook feed being kind of like this biggest chunk of the pie here. But at the same time, Facebook is the most mature platform out of the portfolio. And kind of like the Facebook feed being one of the most mature of the formats within this Facebook portfolio. So then Instagram feed is growing, Instagram stories, but then I think feed is really providing some kind of blueprint into how we can apply and see the next steps for the rest of the formats, because that's just generally how things have been happening on Facebook and across their products. They are building the user base, they are monetizing them, they're making them shoppable. And so I think it's pretty logical to assume that a lot of this other formats will be also kind of having a bigger chunks of that pie moving into the future.
Yeah, David has a really great question about this. So based on the 73% of ad spend, would your recommendation for brands would be to continue to prioritize Facebook activities versus Instagram? I think that's a great question. Do you guys want to start on this?
I mean, go ahead.
Go ahead. Go ahead, Taylor.
I mean, you have to have some type of Facebook feed presence, and paid goes there, organic goes on Instagram feed. That's kind of just a simple breakdown. But the different placements here, we were talking about emerging ones, and Instagram Explorer is one that I always have an eye on. I think it's been maybe a year and a half that's been available, and it's grown immensely. Like these things will continue to develop, and new placements just suddenly appear. Reels is kind of still emerging there. And so when we talked about small businesses being able to be agile, that's one of the ways that I think you take advantage is as those new things develop, be early on that. It's not always going to work out, but that's where you can potentially find some things, especially before it becomes a behemoth.
Yeah, I would say that if I may add, just like think about the user experience on those two platforms. They're very different. You know, when someone's getting on Facebook, they are much more inclined to click through and leave the app and go to the website and read the article on the website and so forth. When they're on Instagram, they don't want to go anywhere. The experience is pretty much in-app. So whenever you're building your strategy and you're looking at different stages of that customer journey, you know, try to think like, where does Facebook fit in into this versus Instagram?
To Instagram's credit, though, I would say that they have developed a much better in-app experience. Over the last even year, even 6 months, like it kind of continues to get better and better, so that you can still follow and potentially have some of those same actions while fitting that user story that you were describing there, Mantis.
Yeah, just an answer to Alexander. How do you kind of, the question is, do we have data comparing that spend placement to where actually users are consuming the content? I think this is a brilliant question. Can you actually match one of these placements with engagement? You kind of can. Like, we've been trying it for a while, and for us, the best metric of engagement so far in this regard is the CTR rate. So we had it in the previous charts there. And if you reach out to our teams, we can give you the breakdown of all ad placements and what the CTR is, where the CTR is available for that placement. And you can make some assessments then what's useful for you. Okay, are we ready to jump to the organic section?
Exactly. What a brilliant segue that was, by the way, the different experience between platforms.
Right, yeah, because this data really shows it, right? What are we seeing here?
Yeah, here we're looking at the top 50 brands on both Facebook and Instagram. And this is year over year. So the little black dotted circle is 2019. You can see what has changed now, Q4 2020. Instagram audience for those top 50 just gets bigger and bigger, more posts, basically the same interactions. But we always kind of have our eye on that audience. And while Instagram not only a year ago was just about to overtake Facebook, now it continues to grow while Facebook gets a little smaller. That doesn't tell the whole story of Instagram versus Facebook, but just as far as organic engagement, this is, Instagram is the place to be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, again, I would say if you added like another bubble here that showed referral traffic, it would be a very different story. I think that would be favoring Facebook significantly.
Yeah, I guess the biggest takeaway here is that you shouldn't be placing your KPIs or goals based on interactions on Facebook, and that's very different for platforms. And you always have to think, what are you trying to achieve by kind of allocating content? And there's no one size fits all. There's always kind of different user stories, user experience, customer experience, and also why people are going on Facebook and Instagram as well. Yeah.
We have a couple of good questions coming in. So one from Alba is video views part of the interactions here. That is a good point. This compares interactions on the post, not the actual view. I bet if we added view in this regard, it would again show different data, because Facebook is much more video forward. Couple more questions. One from George. Is it just a two-horse race between Facebook and Instagram? Because what other platforms are there which may have a higher hit rate for more niche markets? Brilliant question. I think we got to open up the discussion past Facebook and Instagram. And this year has been, or the previous year, really big for obviously TikTok and Instagram. And TikTok are kind of direct rivals. And platform earnings, by the way, they come out next month. So let's pay close attention to how much of maybe user base is being taken from one platform to another. But what do you think in terms of other platforms? What's kind of going on in the space right now?
I would kind of break it down again by the objective, by the demographics, by the industry, also by the region. With TikTok, yes, being kind of amazing up and coming platform. We used to look at TikTok as a platform for the younger generation, for the kids to do the dances, but it's just emerging as something else. It's emerging as the political platform. It's emerging as the kind of educational platform. It's emerging very strongly as an e-commerce platform, and actually has a lot of kind of advantage over Instagram in that their reels are, you could advertise them, you can promote them, and there's like a lot of different shoppable functionalities in there as well. So again, it's there's a lot of there's a lot of definitely possibilities and potential in TikTok, also in Twitter. Twitter has been also great in the past year. I think a lot of it had to do also with the political, socioeconomical changes and awareness that brands have. This is also, by the way, I think a big point of discussion, that a lot of engagement and reach also happened because of the brand activism, and not necessarily directly because brands were kind of just trying to sell their thing. Definitely ads boycotts and dips that we've seen previously, own to kind of brands coming together and, you know, doing their thing together. So I think there's a lot of considerations there for sure.
Yeah, and may you kind of add a bit more, if you can, about the ads experience on TikTok? I think people are asking, like, how does that compare to Facebook?
Because generally the understanding that Reels are Instagram answer to TikTok, right? And we've been waiting, as Taylor mentioned, to have promotion on Reels, and that's been something that kind of been coming as, and again, we've seen it across all the other formats, and we have all the kind of ideas to be able to assume and have an educated guess that it will happen with the Reels as well. But it's already possible with the TikTok. TikTok also had this partnership with Shopify, which made the shoppable experience very easy and smooth. So there's a lot of customer experience kind of considerations in there too. So yeah, I think we will see a lot of different things as the platforms are trying to catch up with each other.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's also questions coming in about Reels in terms of the algorithm. So, like, is Instagram maybe favoring Reels? Is the Instagram algorithm favoring Reels? I think that's also a good discussion.
That would make a lot of sense. And again, if we're following the pattern for every other, like what we had Instagram feed first, then we had stories. How do you convince the creators, the businesses, and just like individual users like us to shift the effort and their time into some new format, because they maybe think that they already have TikTok and there is no point for them in using Reels. So of course, at the beginning, Instagram will be trying to grow the user base before they will actually bring in the monetization options.
Yeah.
While TikTok is, certainly formidable, I recently read a marketing survey talking about 2021 budgets, and more than 70% of marketers said that they were going to put more budget into Facebook. Shortly behind that was Instagram, 4% for TikTok. So I was kind of surprised by that. And so I don't know if it's people just being wary, haven't tested it, if that's the old guard, and we got to talk to some younger marketers, not sure there. But it did seem to be more confidence, more trust in the ones that they're more comfortable with.
Yeah. Let's speak a bit further about engagement on these different platforms, because we have a couple of questions coming in, like how can we increase engagement on Facebook? How can we increase engagement on Instagram? There's a couple of pointers coming up in the presentation that we want to cover. But just before we get to that one, just quickly, let's look at the breakdown of the industries on these two platforms. Maya, I think you had a couple of good points here. Do you want to share them with the audience?
Yeah, for me, that slide just drives it home that these are really different platforms. And while we see kind of increasing amount of blurred lines in there, but when you look at the top distribution of interactions across countries for Facebook, top 3 is e-commerce, retail, and services. And Instagram being kind of traditionally more visual lifestyle platform, we see fashion and beauty in there. So I think it just goes to show once again that these are different platforms, and we can't really necessarily compare them next to each other. We really should consider what is that brands are trying to get out of using each one of those.
Yeah. Maybe looking a little bit at the industries and engagement. So how does it been changing in terms of the past year? What's surprising here?
Yeah, I mean, I think the e-commerce growth on both platforms, and that's kind of right in the middle, is maybe what you expect. What stands out to me is where you see same industry but differing percentage changes. FMCG food decreases on Facebook, increases on Instagram, both fairly significantly. And so again, just sort of showing the ways that the platforms are not the same, and in 2020 have maybe adapted kind of differently.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, any surprises, Maya, for you here?
No surprise at all of e-commerce interactions growth. We are home on our phones. It's perfect cocktail. So
yeah, maybe let's look at the content formats and what's going on there. But still, we gotta drive one last point home about the engagement on the two platforms. Taylor, do you want to walk us through what happened over the course of the year?
Yeah, sure. We can just hit this one quickly. So we're looking at relative post interactions. So both of those will be up at 100 at some point. And for Facebook, it was right during the pandemic when lots of brand announcements, changes, condolences, lots of people going there for news, basically, going to the news feed for news. Meanwhile, Instagram, most times that we look at this, very steady, almost like that click-through rate. But then at the end, Q4 2020, that dip is, I wouldn't say alarming, just interesting to note, because we can see year over year, there was not the same thing last Q4. So you can't just chalk it up to the holidays, I don't believe. So I'm kind of interested to see how that progresses. I think this will start looking a lot more normalized for Facebook once we move kind of far enough ahead to get rid of that large spike. But I think this just really shows the way that people turned to each platform maybe a little differently throughout 2020.
Yeah, there's also a lot of questions coming in about kind of Instagram Reels and also guides and so forth, and stories as well. I think maybe just sharing with the audience that we kind of started looking at stories data a little bit more closely and analyzing that data set, and we'll bring it to you. And I think it makes sense that maybe in that analysis we also try to provide a little bit of guidance around these topics. So I'm sorry that if we can't get to it in this webinar, but we'll definitely create more specific content around that, because I think there's a big need in the market for that.
Yeah, and I think as well, it's in Instagram interest to make this data available as soon as there will be more brands and creators will be spending more times in Reels and kind of trying to have this monetization loop closed.
Now, speaking about engagement in different content formats, Taylor, do you want to walk us through this slide?
Sure. Yeah. Looking at it by post type. So the big one there on Facebook, live video, nearly triple the interactions of regular video. Everything else on Facebook decreased quarter over quarter, but Facebook Live just continued to grow there. On Instagram, it's carousel. So you can have images or videos or both with that. That's consistently the highest one that we see on that platform of those three. And Facebook Live, usually kind of up there, not usually this far ahead. The interactions are there. The audience is engaging with these videos, and we'll kind of see what marketers have done with Facebook Live throughout the year. But it's one of my takeaways is always just encouraging more people to try it out. It doesn't have to be this super advanced thing, super polished. You can find ways to create Facebook Lives that resonate with your brand and your audience.
Yeah.
I really sorry, Maya, I interrupted you. Go ahead.
No, I just wanted to make a comment there on the quality of content. That when else would you be able to see kind of on Netflix, a movie that was shot by a director that he wrote the script in a couple of weeks and then shot it on his mobile phone. I think everybody is very forgiving. Everybody is kind of willing to put up, or not even put up, or enjoy less maybe heavily produced content, less polished content, and also more time sensitive content, which was very important. So something that's kind of feels very relevant to the time and space that we're in. So really, brands don't have to feel that they have to have this overproduced, extremely amazing setup. Mm-hmm. You could just do it on your phone, basically. That's what I'm taking away from this.
Yeah. I really hope that us content marketers will learn how to live with live video permanently, because we kind of, you can see some businesses they try it for a couple of months, and then the content team kind of gets a bit tired, and they move on to something else. It'd just be great if we just found a way to integrate it into our strategy. It's there's just a lot of opportunity there. A couple of people are saying that it's interesting that carousel performs really well on Instagram. I also find that kind of always surprising, but that's the case.
It is pretty consistent, though. We've been doing these reports for a while, and it is almost always the top one of those three on Instagram.
Just a little bit more about that evolution of the live content, and you can really see what happened last year as the pandemic hit, and content marketers really were stuck at home without means of production, and you really had to turn to what's available for us, and live content kind of conversations really became a thing, and we got tired, maybe, I think, as professionals, and we let those programs go, but I hope we can bring it back.
What's maybe expected, go back to that for a second if you can. What's maybe expected in this chart is that huge spike kind of early in the pandemic, and then falling to the same kind of year over year levels during the holidays. But what's surprising, or maybe even disappointing to me, is that we really see Q3 already kind of dropping back. Like, lots of people dipping their toe into the water right away, and then just deciding it wasn't for them. And yet we see that the interaction numbers are there. And so is it just, as you said, Mantis, getting burned out? Are they, feeling like they're investing too much? And so maybe, you just bring the production costs down. Like, it doesn't have to be a super glossy, super produced thing in order to resonate with an audience. And so that's something I would like to see increase throughout 2021, because in part, I just feel like that's where people can really be creative too. I know not everybody's comfortable with live formats, but audiences are forgiving. You can have fun with it. Like, it doesn't have to be a droll thing. I'd like to see people, try that out more and see what different types of even live formats they can come up with, whether it's game shows or different things. If you jump ahead, Mantis, we can see the ones that do get the most interactions, yes, are these, really well put together. I'm not saying that you have to have a 3-hour plus e-gaming / rap battle competition like Real Me in Philippines, or the giant giveaways of Black Friday and 11/11 shopping that we see up there. It's understandable that, especially giveaways, that's going to really bring the absolute most audience. But you can still get a lot, I believe, of ROI from just kind of what we would term more regular live videos, more conversational, have a little game show, Q&A with the audience. There's a lot of different tacks that you can take with it. And I'd like to see people trying that.
Yeah, there's a bit of a convergence happening here with, we see the trend of social commerce really booming on both platforms, really. And I think it's really converging with live, and kind of, if you think of your teleshopping kind of experiences from the 90s, like, a lot of that is moving towards these platforms, and for a good reason. Like, if you think about the kind of shopping experiences that exist right now to people, in-store experiences don't really exist in some parts of the world still. We're in full lockdown, and I think a lot of this live kind of shoppable content is replacing that that kind of experience of a brand.
Mm-hmm. To me, this once again shows this hunger for something that is more authentic, more real, feels less produced and kind of raw, in a way, in the same way that live videos are. Yeah,
and there's I'm gonna let you in on a little secret, but don't tell anyone you heard this from me. We actually internally we're discussing this with Facebook, and they hinted at us that this is kind of the trend that they see emerging from content. So I don't know what you want to do with that information, but that's something that we heard. But a little bit more about
it will stay between 300 of us. That's it. The secret is safe.
Between the 300 of us, yeah. But a little bit about live shopping further. One thing that you should take into consideration, like Taylor, it's exactly what you said. Like maybe you as a brand don't feel particularly comfortable doing it, and it's kind of awkward, like going live, and maybe your brand has really strict kind of guidelines, so it feels like scary to do it, and you'd rather not do it. Well, partner with the content creators, partner with influencers to do it. They do it all the time, and they're going to do it really well, and it's probably going to be more engaging than your video. So an example here is from the shopping with the Kittles for Levi's, and I think probably worked quite well for them.
Yeah, a lot of times that brings in, the audience that the influencer already has, depending on the size of the influencer. And they're better at it, more comfortable. And it also brings a bit of, just kind of a different face to your channels too, especially, if you're someone who does have somewhat regular videos or kind of features employees and things, this just brings in a new face for your audience to engage with, which, it can just help.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. This kind of segues us into the section on influencers. So what has been happening there?
So as I kind of start to describe this, I would ask the audience, how was your influencer marketing budget impacted in 2020? I feel like when we talk to people in Q2 or Q3, they're saying it was cut immediately or one of the first cuts. And that just seems to be largely the case. And so we're not surprised necessarily to see a 17% year-over-year decrease in hashtag ad usage. And that also includes hashtag spawn and all of the foreign language and local versions. So the overall decrease is maybe not surprising. What I did find a bit surprising was that when we look at the size of the influencers, the ones that did grow were those large and extra large influencers at the end of the year. So large, 100,000 to just under 1 million. XL is those mega influencers over 1 million. A lot of the advice that you see in here is about going to the nano and small influencers. And I think largely it's solid advice. And you're always going to see a higher percentage of those people. They're more inexpensive. There's just more of them. But I was surprised to see a bit sort of a rejection of that idea with more investment into those really big influencers.
Mm-hmm. What I think is interesting here as well is to look at the influencers and take kind of like an extra step from there and see kind of the same way that we look at the brands is what industries are they representing? Because yes, while there's definite downtrend when it comes to travel influencers and lifestyle influencers, but at the same time, as we were saying, the home renovation, decoration, craft influencers are probably having the time of their lives. And as for bigger and small influencers, yeah, I'm also very curious. I don't think we've agreed on any sort of explanation here ever before, but I also think what's worth a consideration is the regulation of the whole influencer marketing space that didn't exist up until recently. And influencers were free to do very much whatever they wanted to be and to do. And the last year was really the year when the platforms and the advertising authorities were really cracking down on, introducing the regulations and making sure that they are being followed there. And so I'm wondering if also maybe for big influencers, it's easier somehow to adapt to the new reality. They have they're running their business really like a brand. They know what they're doing. Sometimes they have a legal team. They definitely have managers. So for them, they have a lot of resources to adapt to this new situation. Well, for small influencers, maybe as well, mm-hmm. they are kind of being put in a box of this less secure, easy to cut off as a first kind of marketing section,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a great comment coming in from Barbara, maybe kind of trying to explain this. Maybe that it's the end of the year kind of hurry, spend the rest of your budget quickly situation where it's like we got to pick a few where we spend our bucks on. I think that's an interesting observation.
Which very well could be. And my counter to that would be, is the strategy better, giving it to one or two large influencers or dozens of nano influencers?
Right.
It depends on your situation, but I would guess at least that you could have a lot more potential with those smaller influencers.
Yeah. I totally agree. It's also an interesting point here or comment that influencers learned so much in 2020, as a lot of us, I bet. And the most successful ones were those who managed to bring positivity in their content. So that's another way to break down, not just by industry or by size, but also by the amount of positivity that they're bringing.
Yeah, and there's more comments coming in about influencer marketing experiences from our audience. So Gina, and I'm sorry if I'm butchering your name, but she says that with her brand Palm Beach Tan, we found that nano work much better for us. So it's again echoes that sentiment that Taylor you're sharing. Right. What else do we have? So Marisa says, I also feel like certain industries lost a significant amount of hashtag ad opportunities. Of course, travel, experiences.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. There's just this whole lifestyle of influencers as it used to be with the PR trips, product placements, travels. There's a lot of networking involved, and this whole thing is just gone. So of course it took some time for them to adjust and to understand how they could do things differently this year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, some really had to probably find kind of new niche markets to travel influencer becomes maybe a wellness or a fitness influencer, so something along those lines. Have to adapt, kind of like everybody in 2020.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay, well, Maya, do you want to just summarize a little bit so the audience leaves with a few takeaways here?
Sure. We just want you to leave kind of with these things that we thought were the highlights of what was discussed today. And one of them, of course, is ad spend and reach, that are both continue to grow as marketers continuously increase their efforts across digital channels, and the user base keeps growing as well in general. Then live content experiences that we've discussed, it remains a really good format that, as we said, doesn't have to be heavily produced, doesn't have to be very polished in order to drive engagement and commerce. What we've seen, and one of the examples was the click-through rate, is the extreme resilience to market changes. Like, we've just had very special few months to a very special year. And if anything, I'm shocked to see that some things are stable, and I understand why they're changing if they are. So and last but not least is the influencer marketing. We've seen the downtrend there, but with macro influencers picking up, it would be really, really interesting to see how this develops in the future.
Yeah, thanks for summarizing that. Before we answer the questions in the chat, before we get to the Q&A, just to suggest strongly for you to download the report that a lot of this webinar was based on. There's a lot more granular data in there. And of course, if the data you need is not there, you can reach out to us on any of our channels or respond to the email that you get afterwards. We're going to get that data to you, we promise. And of course, connect with us personally on LinkedIn. And if you have a question at any time and you want to reach out to us personally, we'll connect you to the right people at Social Bakers, and we'll find the right data for you. Are you ready to answer a couple of questions from the chat if there's still a bit of time? Yeah, we got a minute. Right. So Rokas is asking a question that's quite specific. This is maybe a good one. So, hey guys, how many specific interests is most effective to include in a target audience? And how do you decide that audience is invaluable if it still interacts and engages with your content? I think that's a good question. So if you're running ads and you're kind of testing, like, is it that audience or is it this audience? How broad should your audience be? And you're kind of measuring for engagement. I agree that it may be difficult to say, like, was this the right audience or was this not the right audience? That's why you should try to measure the effectiveness of your ads lower in a funnel where you have like some kind of a business transaction already occurring, whether you can kind of tie it to business bottom line. And then you'll see that, okay, if you compare audience with those interests versus that interest, you can see that there's some 3x difference in ROI. So you know that you should target those people versus the other ones. Engagement is like a good indicator, but you should always look further down the funnel. Any other questions in the Q&A?
I would just reiterate once again, because I've seen a couple of questions about that. If you guys need specific breakdown by country or industry, do reach out and we'll try to help you.
Yes, you will receive, as I said at the top, you'll receive this whole recording, so you can watch it all again if you would like. The presentation as well as the report that it's based on, and replying to that email is the best way to get to our data team, get the specific things that you need. We do have one person who just raised their hand and then put it down, I believe. So maybe they jumped out. But yeah, reach out to us on social. As Mantis said, our team is excellent at connecting you to the right places that you need. And, we want to help you make kind of practical, positive choices with your marketing. So I hope you all enjoyed this. Mantis, thank you. Maya, thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Yeah.